All right. So today we have Brittany Collins here with us from Queen City Counseling and Consulting. She is going to talk a little bit about a topic that I think personally I've had many conversations with parents when they're kind of going through the admissions process, whether diagnosis has been recent or they've known for many, many years, just kind of this very, very emotional topic. So I know lots of parents were intrigued to kind of have this safe space to learn and talk about this a little bit more. So Brittany, I'm going to pass it over to you, and thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here and glad to speak on this topic. I will say that I'm a mom of an almost 3-year-old, and the parental guilt and shame is something that I'd heard about, but not necessarily experienced firsthand, and recognized that even at birth, I feel like it's something that they just hand you as a mom. You take your bundle of joy, and then you take your bundle of guilt and shame with you. So definitely recognizing a little bit firsthand of just as a parent in general, how that can impact us. And then especially when there's something that you're dealing with your child, how that can go even deeper. So I'm, as Carrie said, a therapist here at Queen City Counseling. I've been here for about a year and worked in mental health for over a decade, with adolescents, with families, with adults in a variety of settings. And again, guilt and shame is something that impacts all of us, not just parents. And so it's good to have awareness of what that is, what we can do about it. So let's pull my screen back. Okay. So I've got some kind of discussion pieces throughout that may work with a group, may work with just one. So I know Shayna, you're on. Not sure if I can call you to the spotlight to share what brought you here today.
You can. It's my husband and I,
Okay.
and we're not on video because we're doing some remodeling type things. Um, but what brought us is we have two children who have special needs, basically, and we've been looking for, basically, I would say more so the support of a group. Um, it bothers us because you can explain what's going on with your children to people who do not understand, and they will, oh, I get it, I understand, I understand. No, you don't. And it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, anytime there's an opportunity, we try to be innovative and creative in our approaches to parenting our children. So anytime there is an opportunity to get with a group or to talk about our feelings, basically, we definitely want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you're here and looking for those opportunities to connect and
Mm-hmm.
find like-minded people that really have been there and really can say they understand, and
Mm-hmm.
help you feel less alone in the process.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know, Carrie, I'll put you in the spotlight too. I know you said kind of having a lot of conversations with parents. What are some of the things that you hear around guilt and shame?
Yeah, for sure. I think that just personally, I first of all, I can connect personally as well. As you mentioned earlier in the presentation, I have a 4-year-old and an 8-month-old at home myself. So that, like you said, it just comes with being a parent. So, every step you make paired with some kind of potential guilt and shame. But then also in my role specifically with our population of students here at the John Crosland School, um, I find that I most often have parents kind of bring this topic to the table when it's a fairly new diagnosis that I think similar to what Shayna was speaking to, there's just this feeling of isolation and of confusion and not really knowing what next steps to take, and kind of just feeling that level of desperation of I need to grasp at every straw that I can because I don't know what to do. So I think that's often where I experience parents are kind of living in that realm of worry.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is often, what we experience at first when there's something that's that's wrong or a need that our child has. And after we get past that initial stage of like, what do we do? What's the problem solving? Things go a little deeper and we start thinking, what have I done wrong? Right? How is this my fault? And one thing that I, kind of just wanted to start off with is reminding us that it's not your fault. Again, a lot of times it's just something that is innate in us as someone who cares, that we have this guilt that comes with us, I believe, as a parent. And that when there's anything that's kind of less than perfect going on with your child, that guilt starts coming through. So a lot of times that may come from, receiving conflicted messages of what's right and wrong, right? Judgment from our own parents or parent friends that we have, social media that we follow. If I'm in the Charlotte Moms group on Facebook, and sometimes we'll see, variations of what parents are doing for their kids and struggles that parents are having or successes that they're having. And that comparison comes in, right? If we're receiving different messages from folks in our lives of you should parent this way, no, you should parent this way, feeling that guilt of I can't know what's right, or every time I try something, someone tells me I've done it wrong, or something happens, or it's not enough. So just reminding ourselves that, many times, especially when it comes to, mental health diagnosis, or it comes to chronic health conditions, or cancer, or debilitating illness, that these are things that we cannot prevent, that these are things that have just for whatever reason happened to our child, and it's not our fault. We're not a bad person because of it. And we'll talk more again about kind of guilt and shame and kind of making amends for if there are things that we did do that could have contributed to some challenges that our kids are having. So this is a quote or kind of statement that I think kind of speaks volumes of when we get that criticism from those around us, even other folks that are parents, but they're not us parenting our child. It's called The Man in the Arena, and it says, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself because, who at best, got distracted by that, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So this, I think, perfectly captures parenthood in a nutshell. Especially for me personally, just these early years of having a toddler and feeling like I'm literally in an arena covered in dust, sweat, and blood, and other things that come with toddlers. That judgment that's outside of that arena doesn't really matter. What matters is what I'm doing in the arena, that no one outside can really know what I'm experiencing down here. And so the criticism either that I receive or I perceive from others, it's important to not let it hold that much weight, right? And remembering that we're the ones down here kind of fighting the fight, looking to get through whatever challenges is in front of us. So what I want to cover today, just differentiating between guilt and shame, looking at what contributes to the feelings of guilt and shame that we have, recognizing the ways that it shows up in our parenting, and sharing some ideas for how to navigate these feelings. So first thing, kind of just sharing the definitions of guilt and shame. So guilt's an emotion that a person experiences when they believe they have broken their own standard of conduct or violated a moral standard, and they bear responsibility to this action. Shame is deeper than guilt, and it involves more of our sense of self. So we can feel bad for what or who you are, focusing more on your character. And it's a deep feeling of being flawed or feeling that only perfection is acceptable. And within guilt, there are two types of guilt that I want to point out. There's healthy guilt and unhealthy guilt, and there's a difference between those. So healthy guilt is an important thing to feel, right? This is that we've done something that is objectively wrong, something that we can take ownership of the part that is ours to own. For example, if we've had a long day, we're exhausted, and our kid asks us to open a juice box for them and we snap at them, right? Okay. We've done something that we feel is wrong, right? We've made a mistake. We didn't mean to do that. We can make amends. The unhealthy guilt is a feeling that we've done something that is against our irrationally high standards, right? Or maybe we're taking more than our share of responsibility in a situation. So this could come that, guilt that we got our teenager the off-brand Stanley Cup instead of the real $60 Stanley Cup, or we didn't cut their peanut butter and jelly sandwich in little stars and we just got it on bread and threw it in a bag, right? So these are high standards for ourselves that we feel like we have to live up to. Again, back with that, taking too much on as our own responsibility, thinking about maybe our child doesn't do well on a test at school and we're taking all the blame for it. We can kind of divvy that out and think, okay, did our kids study, right? Did they put the effort in they needed to in the test? But also, could we have sat down and gave them some more support? So kind of realizing it's only part of our responsibility, which I see a spelling mistake. In my notes, doesn't matter. So focusing on what you can work on, right? Some of those other kind of statements that can get in our head that can lead to feeling shame, feeling like we must get everyone's approval. We must be a perfect parent. If I'm not a perfect or insert whatever adjective parent, then I'm not a valuable person. It's important also kind of recognizing what our triggers are for shame. So sometimes if we are not recognizing guilt when we feel it, right? So not having that awareness of what is that initial guilt, or we're always thinking that feeling any guilt is a bad thing, or we're taking too much responsibility or none at all that can build up resentment, right? That can lead us to comparing ourselves to other parents, trying to focus solely on pleasing others and not taking care of ourselves. So going a little deeper into guilt and shame. So guilt says I did something bad, whereas shame says I am bad. So again, shame kind of going to your inherent worth. Guilt saying my actions or beliefs don't live up to the kind of parent I believe myself to be. Shame says I am a bad parent whose actions or decisions line up exactly with who I am. Guilt says I need to apologize for something I've done. Shame says I need to apologize for who I am. Guilt says we can do something to make amends. Shame says, how can I make amends when I can't separate the bad acts from the bad me, right? So that shame, again, we get enmeshed into that. So more discussion. How does this show up for you? Like how Shana and our other participant that joined, if you want to share, how does shame and guilt show up for you in your life as a parent?
I think I can kind of pick. Oh, go ahead, Shana. Sorry.
I guess I could say, looking at, for me, it's the comparisons. I have nieces and nephews who are about the same age as my children, and making those comparisons. I think that's where the guilt,
Mhm.
I would say guilt and shame, where they come from for me, and just learning how to um, not hold myself accountable for something that I can't control.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when are your nieces and nephews around the same age as your kids?
They are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That is very, very hard, especially when it's, within your family and kind of comparing essentially all of the kids of the same age, and
Mhm.
just seeing developmentally how they're different and how they may not be like other kids, or this one's achieving this and why isn't mine able to achieve that?
Mhm.
Having that in your face really brings up that feeling of guilt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Our other participant, do you care to chime in? If so, you can unmute. If not, just hang around.
I was going to say that I'm experiencing an interesting phase right now that I think was unexpected on my part of recently having my second child and the kind of guilt and shame that comes even just, Shayna, you're talking about comparisons to other family members and things, but even within my own two children myself, the difference in the amount of energy I put in just having one and now there's two, and is the second getting the same, or they get sick back to back and I can't miss that much work for
Mm-hmm.
both of them. So I have to pick which child I want to be the one to stay home with. And so that's even been an interesting guilt, shame that nobody else is putting on me, but it's just my own creation between my own children.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot with the families that I work here too, that have a child in our program and may have other siblings in the home as well. That most times, if you have a child who is in, an intensive mental health treatment program, or just having some, even if it's physical struggles, physical health challenges, anything that calls for a need of more of your time and energy and attention, is naturally going to pull it away from somewhere else. And that may be pulling away from the other children. And children may naturally act out because they recognize that shift. And so you may notice the younger children are starting to act out more, or to question why you're not as present while you're trying to care for the other child. Developmentally, they may or may not understand your need to focus more on the child that's having the struggles. And as you're witnessing that too, that internal pull from yourself, well, how can I balance it out? How can I make, sibling understand that, that Joseph is just having some more struggles and needs some more attention right now. Sometimes that I've had older siblings also feel guilty for taking more of their parents' attention away from their younger siblings too. So just as the parents are feeling that guilt and shame for having struggles, a lot of times the teenagers are feeling it too. They're feeling like, I'm not worthy of this attention, or this is taking it away from my kids. So it kind of turns into a whole family kind of feeling, state of being in that situation. Let's see. So the impact of guilt and shame when we experience it, it impacts us mentally, emotionally, and physically. So we start feeling resentment. It could be towards others who seem to have a more carefree life, or who have it easier, don't have as many challenges. Comes out as irritability towards our loved ones, comes out as symptoms of depression. Perhaps we have a low mood or not as much motivation. We're not interested in doing anything fun, kind of having sleeping problems, our eating's changed. We may feel low self-esteem and low confidence, isolating from people that we care about, and just getting easily distracted, right? We've got so much going on in our mind that it's hard to stay focused. Can cause problems in our relationships. So there can be some damage to trust if we feel like we're getting criticism from those around us, causing some conflict around what's right and wrong when it comes to parenting, and just feeling misunderstood and feeling detached. Kind kind of like Shayna shared, of just the friends and supports in your life saying they understand, and you're feeling like, but you really don't, right? And that feeling of feeling misunderstood kind of leads us to detaching and stepping back from our supports. Overall, can lead us to just feeling trapped, feeling powerless, and feeling unable to change, right? So we've naturally, when things get challenged, we have a tendency to try and disconnect in a certain way from those feelings, those unpleasant feelings. So with guilt and shame, we're finding, how do we disconnect from what that is? And that can look a few different ways. Sometimes it can look like we're moving away. So we're getting away from anything that would present an increase in that feeling, right? We don't want to have any more guilt and shame. So that could mean that we're withdrawing from people, we're kind of hiding what we're going through, silencing ourselves, or keeping secrets, right? So kind of the suffering and silence mentality, that we have so much going on, but we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk to anybody and bring it up, right? And what we know is the more that we keep quiet about things and bottle them up, the louder they get internally and eventually come out in one shape or form, and usually in a way that we don't intend them to, right? That resentment builds up, it comes out in irritability. So somehow it's getting out, right? We can't just kind of silence and ignore what we're feeling. It's still going to be spinning around in our subconscious. We can also go full force, right? And disconnecting from what we're feeling by attempting to earn connection or reconnection by appeasing and pleasing. So we're going overboard. So if we're feeling guilty about something or feeling shame, we're overcompensating, right? So if we, say we feel guilty about showing up late to our, kids' basketball game, and they just made a 3-point shot and we're feeling guilt. All right, we're going to overcompensate in this situation by showing up early and in the front row to everyone, and potentially having to lie to our boss to get out of work to be there, or ignoring the other kids pick up at school because we're going to be front row because we feel so bad, right? Versus healthier strategies that we'll talk about later on, but again, kind of going above and beyond to appease and please based on that guilt that we're feeling. That could also look like, are we kind of gift giving to our child or letting them get away with undesirable behaviors, or giving them everything that they could want because we feel guilty about something. Moving against, so that's where some conflict arises. So trying to gain power over others, using shame to fight shame and aggression. So if we're feeling shame, we're kind of taking that out on others to make them feel shame. Goes back to the saying that hurt people hurt people. So we think about kind of patterns of abuse in families and how sometimes that trickles down generationally. A parent who may have experienced abuse may be more likely to continue that pattern with their child because of the feelings they have around that. So recognizing, are we taking out our shame and making others feel shameful? So is there any, before we get to this, anyone recognize any patterns that they tend to do when they experience shame or guilt? Go back to that slide. I know I'm personally one that's, I think it varies for me, but I'm usually moving away, trying to put my head in the sand and pretend that I'm not feeling those feelings. Or alternately, I'm going above and beyond to try and make everything better, right? I feel that guilt. I'm not talking about it, but I'm going to show you through my actions how much that I can be there and how I can kind of try and reverse that guilt or shame.
It's funny listening to this and seeing it in writing, because I can identify as a daughter that my mom was very much a moving toward and trying to overcompensate, and how annoying that was to me as a child experiencing it. So I think I was making the conscious choice to try not to be that type of parent,
Mhm.
but I still do the moving away, which is just something different and equally a result of that same feeling that we were talking about. So it's interesting to kind of see it even from different lenses.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even aside from, patterns of abuse that come through families, we also just learn like our patterns of relating to the world in general from our parents or the environment that we're raised in. So as you say that, can picture that my mom did a lot of kind of moving away, right? Both of my parents never talked about feelings, never expressed how they were feeling, didn't really apologize. It was just hidden away. So growing up and getting into adulthood and into relationships, I realized, oh, what do I do with these feelings? And how do I apologize and talk about things? So sometimes we have to, relearn or learn firsthand how to have these healthy interactions if we didn't learn them in our childhood, right? A lot of that comes up as a parent too, things that we haven't really dealt with from childhood. I know I've read a lot about just kind of reparenting ourselves as we're parenting our child. So it's doing double work, right? Like we're working to heal our wounds from childhood as they come up with our child, right? Our children trigger a whole lot in us just from their, cries as an infant, and just needing our support nonstop triggers some things inside of us. So being aware of what's coming up for us as a parent, right? We're always evolving, always having things that we're holding on to that it could be worth looking into and doing some investigation of why that's something that's triggering us. So we recognize, again, the shame that we're feeling, the guilt that we're feeling. And the next step is kind of how do we disconnect from that shame that we feel tethered to, reconnect more with ourselves, and reconnect with our children. So a lot of this I pulled from Brene Brown, who's an amazing therapist, researcher, speaker, author, all of the things. And she had developed what's called a shame resilience theory. And so a lot of this is pulled from her work in the shame resilience theory, how we move through shame. So the antidote to guilt that she shared is taking accountability. Again, this may be something that in our own childhood we didn't learn. I was sharing in a parent group last night that generationally, parenting teenagers now is a lot different than parenting teenagers even in the early 2000s, when I was kind of in my teen years. And even further back, it may be not a common thing for parents to apologize to their children, because I'm the parent, I know what's right, I don't make mistakes. Which doesn't send a great message to your kids growing up and thinking, well, do we not apologize for what we've done? Or feeling that shame of, as the child, why am I always the one doing something wrong and my parents aren't taking responsibility? So it's really important to show our children that vulnerability, and to model what it looks like to take accountability and to apologize, and to see that parents aren't perfect either, right? We can still maintain that respect and that kind of sense of, I guess, authority over our children while showing that we're not perfect, while making mistakes and making amends for them. So when it comes to guilt, again, differentiating between the unhealthy guilt that might be unrealistic standards, or taking more than our fair share of the accountability, declaring what is your responsibility, right? What have you actually done in that situation that you can take accountability for? So declaring that to yourself, or to another person, or both, expressing an honest apology and commit to not acting that way again. making the appropriate amends, including possibly asking for forgiveness, and most importantly, forgiving yourself, right? That is an important step as we're looking outward, is to also look inward and give ourselves that forgiveness. And the antidote to shame is connection. So shame is really a lot of that suffering in silence, that we're not talking to other people about it. It's something that we want to keep in the dark. And so the way we get out of shame is by connecting with others. So doing that internal work, recognizing the personal vulnerability that led to the feelings of shame. Again, is it vulnerability around, I have to be a perfect parent, or I don't want to be seen as chaotic. I want to be seen as I have everything under control. I'm the number one mom showing up to everything. So realizing, where does that come from? What am I vulnerable to? What kind of judgments am I trying to avoid? Recognizing the external factors that led to the feeling of shame. Again, is it that secrecy? Is it the silence? Is it the actual judgment you're having from others, or that perceived judgment just by scrolling through Facebook and looking at the different posts and moms or parents that seem to have it all together? Being able to connect with others to receive and offer empathy. So support groups, are beneficial in two ways. One, if we're receiving support, receiving empathy, that helps us to feel not so alone. If we're sharing that with others, we're feeling empowered, like, hey, we have something to offer just by sharing our personal lived experience. The way I got into doing mental health work was working as a peer support specialist, kind of coming into the work with my own experience with depression and anxiety. And I recognized, even facilitating those groups, how much that was helping me just by being there and connecting with others. So providing that service to others in that space was helping me just by giving support to one another, or to folks in the group. Excuse me. So discussing and deconstructing the feelings of shame themselves. So that can be a lot of deeper work that may come in, doing some individual therapy work, doing some kind of, self-help reading on your own to really look at what is the root of these feelings of shame. Research has shown that shame can start developing as early as 15 months. So it's something that we learn early on. Guilt starts developing I think around 3 to 6 years old. So a lot of times, some of these feelings that we have may go back to childhood, and it may take looking back to see, okay, where did this start, or what is this really triggering for me that I'm feeling? Some other ways of coping with guilt and shame, again, like I just said, having that self-awareness and connecting to others. So recognizing your guilt versus your shame, right? Again, things that we can make amends for and things that are kind of just deeper beliefs that we have. Understanding that shame is not our fault, right? Making amends to those that you've hurt. Again, talking about your feelings and building connection. Self-compassion is huge. And I think just as a parent in general, something that's really important. Just as, in these times that we're connecting with others, just as we would give others respect and empathy, giving that to ourselves as well. So recognizing that we are worthy of deserving of that, that we deserve to give ourselves the time and freedom to feel better and to accept our limitations without shame, right? Due to our life circumstances, we may not be able to, buy our kid every new Lululemon Stanley Cup thing that they want, right? That may not be financially within our reach. So accepting that and realize, how can I still show my affection and care for my kid without buying them every new thing that they want, right? Not feeling shame about that. I've been kind of physically sick with some respiratory thing for months. And so feeling like, man, my kid really wants me to run around and go tumble, and I have to sit on the couch, and realizing, all right, I got to take care of myself or I'm never going to get better. And he's still got dad, and this isn't going to scar him for life, then I need to rest and get better for myself, right? So accepting what are those limitations, being kind to ourselves about them. Hindsight too. So this always, with any situation that we're having strong feelings about, hindsight's 2020, right? So using these questions to go back and ask ourselves if there's something that we're feeling guilty or shameful about. Could you have known 100% how the situation would turn out at the time, right? If we made some decision in regards to our kid and it was not a favorable outcome. Asking ourselves, did we do the best that we could? Turning on that self-compassion and that empathy and thinking, what would you think about a friend who had done the same thing? So this is huge. A lot of times when we're struggling with our self-worth or self-esteem, being able to put ourselves in the perspective of, what if a friend did this? What if a friend said this or was experiencing this? What would you just say to them? Well, I would say to them, like, you did the best you could. Everything's going to be okay. All right, turn the mirror in your hand and feel that for yourself, right? Something's getting in the way of you being able to receive that self-compassion for yourself. And then thinking, is it truly fair to think that you could have or should have acted differently in that moment, right? Working on increasing that self-worth. So self-worth is the opposite of shame. So self-worth is a clear view of our strengths, our successes, our good intentions, and our accomplishments. And it focuses on self-respect, confidence, and our sense of value as a person. So with that in mind, we know a lot from research and focus in positive psychology that the more we focus on the positives, that in turn, that will help kind of alleviate some of the negatives, right? Taking a strengths-based approach to solving problems, looking at what are our strengths to help us overcome those. So, recognizing what we do well as parents can also be a daily practice that we do, kind of preventatively, knowing that shame and guilt is something that just comes up as parents, and especially as parents of a child that may have a disability or a mental health challenge, it may be even stronger compared to our peers. So this is kind of a little activity that you guys can do daily. Something that you could write down. You could keep a journal or notebook to jot these things down. Make it something that you do every morning or at the end of the day before bed to kind of summarize what happened that day. And writing down, what are my strengths as a parent? What am I good at? What are my intentions as a parent? So thinking like, what do I want to instill as my child or in my child, or my intentions to keep my child safe, teach them right and wrong, provide them a loving, supportive household, ensure their best education, provide them access to interests and hobbies. What am I intending to do? And recognizing that as long as the intentions are there, you are a good parent, right? You have those good intentions, that there's going to be times that we fall short. And if we feel like we're getting misguided or we're getting off track, circling back to what our intentions are, our kind of values and focus, and acting from those, right? And reminding yourself daily that you're not alone, that even physically, if you're not connected or talking to someone, just knowing that you're connected to all parents who take each moment as it comes and struggle with that uncertainty and also do the best that they can. A quote that I really love from Maya Angelou is that we do the best that you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better. So kind of giving us permission for things that we're struggling with from our past, that as ever evolving human beings, We don't know what we don't know. We haven't experienced what we haven't experienced. And once we've gone through it, we can make that conscious effort at any point to pivot and do something different. So having that awareness of what's happened, how it's impacted us, and consciously and intentionally choosing to do something different. So that's what I have. I'd love to hear from you folks that joined. Any questions or comments?
So well, first I want to thank you. I can, of course, only speak for myself, but that was incredibly useful sometimes just to hear those things said aloud.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for presenting. I am going to stop the recording, and then if anyone that's here does have any questions or concerns, we can, well, I don't think there'd be concerns, but any questions,